If you ask a wrestling fan what the best year in WWE history was, there's a strong possibility they will say the year 2000. The main event, mid-card, and lower card all had something going on thanks to a stacked, talented roster and typically excellent creative. Well, most of the time anyway. Even the absence of their biggest draw didn't slow them down, as others either stepped up or stepped in from the competition, even if the competition was far from a close one due to WWE firing on all cylinders in the first year of the new millennium. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best WWE matches of the year 2000. Join us. Number 10, DX and the Radicals versus The Rock, Cactus Jack, and Too Cool on Raw. On the surface, a 10-man tag to close out an episode of Raw might not seem like anything special. However, if you were watching the show on February 7th, 2000, then you will know better. The recently debuted Radicals had turned on Mick Foley in the opening segment, aligning themselves with Triple H in the process. It was then up to Mrs. Foley's baby boy to find 4 partners to help him take on Trips, X-Pac, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn in the show's main event. In the end, he managed to wrangle a bull, 2 breakdancers, and a man with a massive ass. Not exactly the Avengers, but never mind. The Texas crowd, who was super hot for this one, helped elevate a great match to an all-time classic, as these 10 icons of the Attitude Era showed everyone what they were made of. Benoit pinned Sexay to give his team the win, but a wild brawl and the return of Kane meant that the fans in attendance went home happy after all. Number 9, the 6-man Hell in a Cell at Armageddon. As the year 2000 drew to a close, WWE decided to do what we all do around the holiday season: have a massive blowout. At Armageddon, world champion Kurt Angle was given the unenviable task of defending the title inside Hell in a Cell. However, this wasn't just any cell match, it was a 6-way scrap also featuring Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, The Undertaker, and Rikishi. WWE was still trying to get Rikishi over after he ran down Stone Cold, just in case you were wondering why he was there. To the great surprise of absolutely no one, this match was carnage. The 6 superstars bounced each other around like they were basketballs, brawling in the ring, outside of the cell, and even on top of the foreboding structure. This is of course the match that saw Rikishi plummet to his doom off the top of the cage into a bed of sawdust, because there was no way anybody else was taking that bump. Angle retained by pinning The Rock to bring this absolutely bonkers affair to a close, and how nobody got injured in this thing was a minor miracle. Number 8, Triple H vs. Chris Jericho at Fully Loaded. Fully Loaded 2000 was sold on its triple main event, 3 established stars taking on 3 up-and-comers across the show. The best of this trio, which also included Undertaker vs. Kurt Angle and The Rock vs. Chris Benoit, was Triple H vs. Chris Jericho in a last man standing match. Y2J had been tormenting Stephanie McMahon Helmsley, which is putting it lightly, for months, so now it was time for her hubby to step up and defend her honor in brutal fashion. Helmsley and Jericho just looked like they wanted to murder each other out there. Anything that wasn't bolted to the floor was used as a weapon, as control of the match swung back and forth. The game even tapped out to the walls of Jericho, but since that didn't count, Chris put the hold on Stephanie instead, just for the lols. The Cerebral Assassin got his revenge by beating his opponent, but only just. He might not have had his hand raised, but this contest proved that Jericho could hang with the best of them. Number 7, The Rock vs. Kurt Angle at No Mercy. To say Kurt Angle had a good time in 2000 would be like saying Bill Gates has a bit of spare cash lying around. The Olympian absolutely nailed his first full year in WWE, and his greatest achievement came at the No Mercy pay-per-view, where he challenged The Rock for the promotion's top prize. Angle and Rock represented 2 very different wrestling philosophies: technical mastery versus unabashed showmanship. From the get-go, this was a blistering encounter as the action started outside of the ring. This was a no DQ match, by the way, although this was the Attitude Era, so it probably wouldn't have mattered all that much if it wasn't. Thumping chair shots and announce table brawls were matched by submissions and suplexes inside the ring. Rock also punched Angle through a cardboard cutout of himself, which might just be the greatest spot in wrestling history. Even with his doppelganger's help, Rock fell foul to a botched run-in from Rikishi, who accidentally helped the Olympian pin the champ and reach the top of the mountain for the first of many, many times. Number 6, The Rock vs Kurt Angle vs Triple H at SummerSlam. In theory, the world champion should always be the focal point of the company's biggest stories. That was not the case at SummerSlam 2000, as The Rock ended up being the 4th most important part of a triple threat. This was all about the love triangle between Triple H, his wife Stephanie McMahon, and Kurt Angle. Rock, Angle, and Hunter had great chemistry together, but the added storyline drama elevated this clash to one of the great SummerSlam main events. Even a botched announce table spot that gave Kurt a big old concussion couldn't hamper it, as somehow Angle was able to come back and finish the match on autopilot. The champion was able to overcome both of his challenges after Trips accidentally struck his own spouse, allowing Rocky to pin the unfortunate husband to drop the curtain on this wrestling version of EastEnders. Number 5, the Dudley Boys vs Edge and Christian vs the Hardy Boys at WrestleMania 2000. We mentioned earlier that 2000 was the year of Kurt Angle, but it was also the year of men chucking themselves off ladders for our entertainment. WrestleMania 2000, one of the least consistent manias in history, saw 3 duos compete together for the first time ever, as World Tag Team Champions the Dudley Boys put their titles on the line against the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian. This was far from a normal match though, as the belts would be contested for in the first ever triangle ladder match. That said, as there were 6 people involved, shouldn't this have been a hexagon ladder match instead? The competitors went all out to cause as much mayhem and destruction as possible, as they jumped off ladders, were pushed off ladders, were pushed off ladders through tables, were pushed off ladders to the outside of the ring. ENC got the win by shoving Matt Hardy to his doom in the closing moments, but this was the night that all 3 of these teams increased their value tenfold. Number 4, Triple H vs Cactus Jack at No Way Out. After failing to wrest the World Championship away from Triple H at the Rumble, more on that down the line, Mick Foley wanted another shot at the gold. He got his wish at No Way Out, but this bout would be different. Not only would it be inside Hell in a Cell, a structure Mick was all too familiar with, but if he lost, then his career would be over. The cell added a whole other level to the match, as it gave Mick the home field advantage, but also allowed Triple H to beat him up even more than he had done in the past. The one thing everybody remembers this match for happened just before the end, when Cactus Jack had his enemy in a piledriver position on top of the structure. The cerebral assassin was able to backdrop Cactus, sending him crashing through the roof, where he hurtled down to the mat and left a Foley-sized hole in the canvas. Oh, and it still took a pedigree to finish him off. The hardcore legend had gone out in some style, and he definitely never wrestled again, especially not 5 weeks later at WrestleMania. Number 3, Edge and Christian vs the Dudley Boys vs the Hardy Boys at SummerSlam. Not content with committing grievous bodily harm on each other once a year, Edge, Christian, Jeff, Matt, Bubba Ray, and Devon got together at SummerSlam to do it all over again. Whilst their initial meeting had been given the geometrically incorrect title of Triangle Ladder Match, this one was called something different. 3 little letters that would become forever linked to these 6 men. TLC. The first official tables, ladders, and chairs match was somehow even more mental than its ancestor. They had less time to work with, but somehow packed in more action, more spills, more table breaks, and more moments that can only be watched through your fingers while thanking every god out there that you didn't decide to become a pro wrestler. ENC were once again victorious after Christian took out Jeff with a ladder, making them 2 for 2 in crazy ladder-based tag team matches. Some people will prefer the Mania 2000 encounter, and to be honest, we can't really blame them, but for our money, TLC's official debut built on that match and helped lay the groundwork for everything else that would share its name in the decades to come. Number 2, Triple H vs The Rock at Backlash. Speaking of WrestleMania 2000, let's talk about its thoroughly underwhelming main event, shall we? The Four Corners match between Triple H, The Rock, Big Show, and Mick Foley left a lot to be desired, especially as everybody just wanted to see the Game versus the Great One. Thankfully, just a month later, that is what they got. The main event of Backlash pitted the nefarious world champ against his long-running rival, and the McMahon-Helmsley regime did everything in their power to stack the deck against the Brahma Bull. Shane McMahon was the special guest ref with Vince and his stooges on the outside, but even with all this adversity, The Rock fought through it all. Despite his tenacity though, the numbers game eventually caught up with the challenger, and it appeared that all hope was lost, and then the glass shattered. Out came Stone Cold Steve Austin to an ungodly ovation, swinging a chair like a madman to lay out every member of the villainous faction. With a new referee in play, The Rock nailed the champion with a people's elbow to score the 3. The actual in-ring wrestling might not have been that special, but in terms of sports entertainment storyline and big moments, it doesn't get much better than this. Number 1, Triple H vs Cactus Jack at the Royal Rumble. Most of the time, the main attraction of the Royal Rumble pay-per-view is the Royal Rumble match. Not in 2000 though. This show was home to one of the greatest world title matches in WWE history. Triple H was the young cocky champion who needed to prove himself against a big name. Enter Mick Foley in his Cactus Jack persona, who provided the exact challenge Hunter was after. Their street fight in Madison Square Garden over the world title is the stuff of legend, and for good reason. The two men took their war to every corner of the world's most famous arena as chairs, steps, hammers, and even some wooden pallets got used as weapons. This brutal contest was famously put to bed by a disgusting pedigree directly onto some thumbtacks, which Mick apparently thought of on the fly because he's a lunatic. Triple H might have got the win, but he looked like he just survived a war zone, which he basically had. The champion was cemented, the challenger had established himself as one of the all-time great star makers, and a little piece of wrestling history had just been born.